Okay, everyone, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be tuning in from. I have to go double check. We are Jason, episode 117, something like that.
Something like that. Too
Something
many
like
fingers to
that.
count.
Something like that, coming up on 3 years. This one is partially one of my favorites, and it's partially almost a bad news story as well. I think we should almost have a parental advisory warning that some of the data you may see may shock you. But before we do, want to give a shout out to everyone. Please give us a comment in whatever of the four platforms that you may be viewing us on. If you're watching us live, give a shout out where you may be tuning in from. I'm in Colorado. Jason's in Texas. Our producer extraordinaire is in Georgia, and we've got awesome support from our colleague in Romania. So shout out to all the folks helping us get this produced, but love to hear from you as well. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in as well. So, Jason, what are we here to talk about today?
We are here to talk about the thing that every IT conversation should be around in 2023, and that is preparing for cyber. So we're going to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it within the context of a greater landscape of kinds of outages. This is another installment of data from the Data Protection Trends 2023 report, largest report of its kind, 4,200 unbiased IT leaders taking a blind survey, didn't know it was from Veeam at the time. And one of the questions that we looked at was around what causes outages. So Dave, let's take a look at what the data shows. And what you're looking at here on the right-hand side is organizations were asked, what all kinds of outages have you experienced and the causes of them? And you see those as the long lines on the right-hand side. And then this is the third year in a row that we've asked this question. So each year in 2021, 22, and 23, we asked what was the cause of the most impactful outage last year. And so those are those short lines that you see on the screen. Dave, I think the first thing that we ought to point out is that while we always want to talk about cyber, and certainly cyber is the sexiest, for lack of a better word, IT discussion that a lot of folks are having. Many folks are over-rotating on it, by the way. Take a look at how many other kinds of crises organizations suffered from over the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway from my perspective here. If you look on the left-hand side at the various kinds of outages, whether it's application, server, storage, networking, you name it, basically everything that we've been worried about as an industry for literally half a century in terms of causing downtime, still in effect. And in fact, if you look over at the right-hand bars, to Jason's point, when you could check all that apply, you could pretty quickly realize you're into the multiple hundreds of percent, meaning there are multiple things taking down a server on a 12-month period. And unfortunately, cyber rises to the top. So if I try to net all that out, everything that we used to worry about going wrong in the data center to some degree is still going wrong, despite dual redundant components like multiple power supplies, better high quality components with better mean time to failure. And yet, what percolates to the top for the second year in a row, most commonly experienced, tied for number one, cyber, most impactful, and that probably isn't a surprise, Jason, also cyber.
Yeah, it's, I love how you said that. In 2023, apps still crash, right? Hard drives still fail, data still corrupts, users still do silly stuff, right? All those other things of why we've always been solving backup for the 30 plus years that you and I have been doing it still matters, right? And that said, so first and foremost, I would tell you that backup still matters in the broad case. DR still matters in the broad case. Do not think that backup equals cyber preparedness, right? And the only thing you should be thinking about is cyber. That said, and I've muted out the rest of them, for the third year in a row, cyber was the cause of the most impactful outage that an organization has suffered. And Dave, we got more bad news coming behind this.
Yeah, unfortunately, we really do. Here's what we're going to actually kind of show people when we see how many times organizations are getting hit. We've all heard the phrase, it's a matter of if, or when, rather, not if, I should say that in the reverse order there. We've heard that phrase, but here's data that backs it up from almost 2,000 organizations. A simple question was asked there in the white font. How many ransomware attacks has your organization suffered in the last 12 months? You can see the distribution, Jason. The two things I'd like to point in on is year over year, because we asked the same question in the prior year.
Yep.
The organizations saying none dropped from 24% down to 15%. And just if you look with your eyeball, sort of in the middle, the two highest responses are getting hit 2 times or 3 times in a 12-month period.
Yeah, so let's double down on both of those points because I think there's a lot of value in each of them. As you mentioned, when we asked the same survey question last year, 24% said they had not been hit, meaning 76% had been hit at least once. This year, it's down from 24 down to 15. And as you and I and our friend and CTO Danny Allen, Edward Bajamina, there's a lot of cyber folks at Veeam, and they all are saying the same thing. That number is even erroneously high, the 15% that haven't, because what we've heard over and over again is that the average gestation rate once a bad actor is in your environment can be up to 200 days. Well, we're asking about the last 12 months. 200 is a little over half of that. So you should probably presume about half of those folks are actually wrong. They just don't know, right? Either the bad actor is still lurking away around and just hasn't hit the trigger yet, or it happened in a different part of the organization that this particular respondent was not part of. And yet 85% of organizations have gotten hit at least one time. Dave, I like your read on the idea that look at these two top ones. The thing that actually scares me even more than that, and I make a little bit of fun of this, bad sense of humor, but think about the top folks that got hit 4 or more times in a year, right? 11 plus 5, so that's 16, 17%. 17%, 1 in 6 organizations got hit basically once a quarter.
Yep.
I mean, can you imagine the leadership team meeting where in your QBR you're saying, well, the results of this quarter's cyber attack was, I mean, that's some tough news.
Yeah, it really is, because unlike other disasters or outages that we saw on that first slide, you don't know if you're still under attack. You don't know if the incident has passed. If you think about a natural disaster, a weather disaster, for example, the hurricane's passed. You know when it's coming, perhaps. You get a little bit of a warning.
Yep.
You also know when it's over. With cyber, you don't know if you're still under attack at the moment you discovered. You probably aren't sure which data or systems are cleansed and which ones still need to be triaged and eradicated. So to your point, Jason, if you're really getting hit 4, 5 times or more, 6 or more a year, you're under constant activity to try to unwind. You're basically in constant discovery mode, trying to validate in addition to doing all your normal day job activities.
Yeah, just thinking about the breadth of what that attack surface looks like, and we're going to look at that a little bit later. But before we do, what's the breadth of the map look like, Dave?
Yeah, let's check this out here. So in the United States, we've got Virginia coming in as well. We also see, let's go to looking over Spain, Netherlands, France. I think there's a couple others in there too. So we'll be sure to update that. And then in South America, we've got Brazil and Peru.
Hey, coast to coast, all green. Love that.
Awesome. And be sure to comment if you have anything you want to chat with. But if we get back to the data now, it's like almost here's the parental advisory warning, but wait, it gets worse.
Yeah. All right. So first and foremost, 85% of organizations getting hit, right? So now let's take a look at what happens when they get hit. And again, especially for the trolls out there, I want to point out these are not Veeam customers. This was an unbiased sample, largest in the industry overall, using a research firm as the blind proxy for this. But let's take a look at when organizations were hit. And remember, we're talking about 85% of the population, right? When organizations were hit, on average, they reported 39% of their production data set. So just to kind of put that in picture, 2 out of 5 hard drives, right? 2 out of 5 mailboxes, 2 out of 5 group folders, 2 out of 5, whatever you hold dear in IT, shredded.
Yeah, and I always like to look at boundary conditions. Your point 2 out of 5 or 39%, that's the average. If you look at the kind of red bars from approximately 9 o'clock to a little past 12 o'clock, you've got a quarter, a little more at 26% that lost at least 61% of data.
Right.
And that 7% sounds like a small number, but the sample size here is 1,617 responses. I'm getting out the calculator. So my trusty HP calculator, that's 113 organizations that said they lost 80% or more of their data.
That's scorched earth territory at that point. I mean, you're just done.
That absolutely is. Now, this specific question, we're asking about the most significant ransomware attack, but if you kind of cross-correlate what we're looking at on that data point with the previous, if you're like most organizations, you're probably getting hit 2 or 3 times or more per year.
Right.
So in this case, 113 organizations that we sampled said that they lost over 80% of their data, and that was just one event. It doesn't take too long before that is literally a business compromising or business threatening scenario if you continue to lose that much data.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and Dave, it gets worse, right? So 85% are getting hit. They're getting shredded about 2 out of 5 of whatever they hold dear in IT. And with all their heroics involved, they're only able to get back a little over half of whatever got affected. Right. So the right hand side of that question said, think about that most significant attack. What percentage of data was your organization able to recover from the attack? So back in the napkin math, because I don't have one of those fancy HP calculators anymore. If 55% of the data was recoverable, then 45% was not. 45% lost of that 39% that was affected. Back of the napkin, I think is around 17, 18%-ish. Gone. 18% of your data not recoverable, right? I mean, this is why we're all talking about it, because when, not if, it happens, it's going to be bad every single time.
Yeah, and I just did a couple more, calculations on this. If we kind of look at the we'll call it 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock range, meaning the 16% of those that responded that said they could get less than 20% or 20% or less of their data back. That's 247 organizations that could only get 1 out of 5 files or worse, maybe 1 out of 6, 1 out of 7, whatever the case may be. Best case, they're saying 247 organizations, they could only get 1 out of 5 apps, 1 out of 5 files. You look at the sort of the right answer, the most desired answer in the green, kind of, I'll call it from roughly 10 o'clock to up to 12 o'clock. Better news, but still, that's only 309 organizations out of 1,545 that got more than 80% of your data back. And, if I just take it as it is roughly more than 80 at 81%, that still means they potentially lost 19% of data on their most significant attack. We're already asserting that the likelihood is they got attacked more than once. Jason, I think you may have said the phrase, maybe looking at last year's data, this year's even worse. Nobody has 19% of production data that they can afford to do without. And this is on the better case scenario.
Yeah. Look, for those that are watching at home, I would highly encourage you, take a screenshot of this, right? Start circulating this between your cyber teams, your DR teams, your executive management, and say, if we just hit the average, maybe we beat the odds, but if we just hit the average, what does that look like from a business impact perspective? Again, the whole idea of us sharing this data, this is unbiased research. We sponsor with a third party. They go get the answers. It's just to have some fresh conversations at scale, right? You're not going to find another industry report that has 1,500 organizations that said this is how bad it was. Actually, you will, though. There is actually a report out we published a ransomware report where this is a completely unbiased sample based on just broad demographics. Back in last May, we published a report called the Ransomware Trends Report. And that report, the survey company went out and found 1,000 organizations, all of whom had suffered at least one ransom, so same kind of demographic as these respondents, and then looking at what did they learn from it. Because in that report, we look at the why. Why were they only able to get half of their data back? Well, the most common cause was because the bad actor got a hold of the backup repositories, right? Why was so much data affected? Well, number one cause is because you didn't patch the servers. And so they were going after known vulnerabilities once they got in the environment. But also, and we'll give you a link to that report before it's over. But as far as the why goes, a lot of this stuff is preventable. This is not a Veeam commercial, and we don't actually have any prepared answers for those things today. We just want to get the conversation started.
Yeah, here's where I'll go off script and we'll make it a slight plug for Veeam. We've got a comment that came in from a Veeam customer in Hungary that said last year we got ransomware. It was one long day, but we could fully recover with Veeam backup and replication. That's obviously the goal. Of course, that's every vendor's goal, but we love to hear that. Part of the reason why we really want to highlight these statistics, as maybe unsettling as they are, is it so that we can consciously look to implement better digital hygiene? Jason just rattled off a few things that some of which have nothing to do with backup and recovery. Patch management, user training on phishing links, as turning off RDP. There's a whole host of very good things that ideally we were always doing as IT professionals. But this data suggests that if you haven't been doing that, or if for some reason your business hasn't prioritized things like patch management, it's really time to start now, because ransomware is largely, I like to say, Jason, non-discriminatory. Yes, we know that there are potentially state-sponsored activities, or maybe someone's going after a specific corporation, but a lot of times it's just going after IP ranges. It's literally sending 100,000 emails a day, hoping that somebody somewhere clicks on something.
Yeah, we're starting to hear more and more stories about cyber attack as a service, where the bad actors just go to these platforms and they can launch these attacks at massive scale with a surprising amount of creativity along the way. Dave, as long as we're going off script, carrying that Veeam color brand for a second, this is where we should be talking about what is my favorite product in the Veeam portfolio, which is Orchestrator, right? That idea of leveraging cloud-powered and also cyber-integrated orchestration. Because when this happens, this is not the time to say, how do we rebuild all of our servers from scratch? This is where you're going to be really happy that you had orchestrated testing to make sure that the backups are clean during ingest. You're going to have orchestration to make sure that you're not reintroducing poison into the environment during the restore process. Orchestration is a huge part of the upcoming release of Orchestrator. We started celebrating that during the V12 launch event last week. Orchestrator V6 is designed to help you shrink that time between snakebite and hospital, right? How do we shrink that time? You don't get past this without it. So lots of good stuff that we should be talking about from that perspective.
Yeah, good shout out, Jason. And I'm being told actually we got a couple updates on the map. If we hit that, a few more countries have come in. If I look over into Europe, see Portugal, Hungary, also Colombia. My bad. Yep, Colombia in South America.
Nice.
And then we've also got Tunisia and Nigeria. So it's always just, actually it's an honor. I was going to say it's a surprise. It's a surprise, but it's an honor for Jason and I that so many people globally, now going on 3 years, still find this interesting. We work hard, our production team works hard to try to give you some content, some of which we don't think you can get elsewhere, but we just appreciate the conversation. This isn't really a Veeam commercial. It's really awareness. Yeah, from time to time we drop some Veeam things in there. That's sort of the nature of what we do, because that's our area of focus and our area of expertise. However, no matter what backup solution you're running, or you may be running multiple backup solutions, you owe it to yourself to get educated and to try to put your organization into a better position. I like to say, Jason, you cannot do everything if you're like most IT shops. If you are able to do that with unlimited resources, more power to you. But realistically, you can't do everything, but you can do something. And so the real purpose of these data points is not so much even for the administrators, because administrators typically know what they wish they could do if they had more time or more resources at their disposal. It's really to convey to management, even upper management, that this is globally, irrespective of company size, irrespective of what vertical you're in, what geography you're in. It's kind of red alert all across the board. So anything you can do to reduce the attack surface, a term you used earlier, Jason, that I really like, is goodness.
Yeah, and that's going to probably cue us up for maybe our last data point on this. So we talk about, what you have to do and the need to do. You got to do something, right? The problem is every hour that you spend proactively preparing against cyber, every dollar that you spend on either detection technologies or backup and recovery technologies, those are hours and dollars that aren't being put into IT for what you'd really rather be doing. Right. So, Dave, I know this is a big area of interest for you around digital transformation. I'm more of the tangible IT modernization side of it. But again, I just keep thinking about there's all the stuff that you want to do for the sake of the organization, and then there's the stuff that gets in the way of that. You want to break down the slide for us?
Yeah, so digital transformation, a phrase that's been thrown about, even before the pandemic, but especially in the last 3 years. For many of us, digital transformation has meant how do we pivot our business in the changing landscape that has resulted in these last few years. There's a lot of things that the organization, the business wanted to implement, but what you can see from this data is, and it's the same kind of construct. The long bars are all the challenges or inhibitors to achieving your digital transformation goals. And then we stack rank this by the single most challenging. Jason, I would almost say this is analogous to our outages slide. So while there's many things that can cause outages, cyber was the most impactful and the most experienced. Here, when we think about digital transformation, there are many things that could be causing issues or challenges, headwinds with that, but cyber rose to the top. And in particular, every data point we've seen for really, I'll say decades. When I was at Gartner, they had the industry's largest CIO survey. Skills were always either number one or number
Yep.
two in terms of issues or headwinds. Here you see, IT professionals are saying skills is an issue for them, economic uncertainty, of course, but yet even despite long-standing concerns like skills, an economy always matters at some point. Cyber rose to the top. What this means, I think, Jason, is to your point, if you're not pre-investing, you're not trying to do something proactively to shore up your cyber resiliency ahead of time, your company is going to be significantly more at risk in being able to achieve its digital transformation. Not to get too sort of melodramatic, but what that could ultimately mean is your company is literally at risk the longer you don't address some of these concerns that could be leading to cyber attacks.
Yeah. All of us want to do better, right? If you take out the technology from this part of the conversation, think about the home that you live in, right? I walk through my home, and every weekend I think there's that little thing over here I wish I could go fix, and there's this little thing over here I probably ought to go take care of. There's little things that I want to do, and there's bigger things that I aspire to do in the house. Hey, I'd really like to paint these walls. I really like, there are things that you want to do. Now, some of those, just like on the slide, are limited by my skills. I do not have carpentry and electrical and plumbing and in my depth of skills. And so I have to bring in some outsiders to supplement for that. Other things I could do if I had the time, if I had some dollars along the way. The problem is, while I would like to do all these things inside of my house, I got a problem because the fence outside in my backyard is falling down. And I got critters coming in through my back fence, right? And that's really what you have is you have bad actors that are taking all of your resources. So I got to spend all my weekends fixing the fence on the outside of the house and the locks on the deadbolts. I'd rather do the stuff in the house that would actually raise the quality of life for my family, but I got to do this stuff instead. And that's what I hope you take away from. Not only is cyber going to be something that can really be an existential threat to the company, as much as you'd like to do other good stuff, you're stuck doing the have tos instead of the want tos, and the business suffers from that. Even if you're in the 15% that cyber didn't hit you this year.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely.
that makes my heart sad. It just does.
It represents a huge opportunity cost. And so, hopefully we've shared enough data points where, people can really take this and try to put their organization in a better position. Speaking of organizations, after we showed the last update to the map, we had Ohio from the United States come in, Canada also,
There you go.
Slovakia, Senegal, Dakar, and India. So shout out to all of those people. And updating, we have Georgia and Czech as well. So huge shout out to everyone there.
Love that. Love that. Hey, as long as we're on looking at breadth across the world, let's look at some breadth across the research while we're at it. Just as a quick plug for some of the other research, we've been citing stats out of the Data Protection Trends Report, which you can see in this lower right-hand corner. Hit that QR code, hit that URL for that one. I mentioned in passing the Ransomware Trends Report that actually debuted at Veeam in May last year. You know, Dave, seems like we've got another Veeam coming up this May as well. Maybe there'll be some new data to help with that conversation. But above and beyond that, also, when we made an investment in Salesforce, we wanted to understand what Salesforce people wanted. So we did some research on Salesforce. When we made our investments in cloud several years ago, we started surveying IaaS admins, SaaS admins, PaaS admins, et cetera, along the way. So please feel free to take a look at all that research. It's here to help you have better, smarter conversations with your teams.
Yeah, and as we look ahead as well, we do want to give a shout out. Just last week, we had our version 12 and many other product releases associated with version 12 go generally available. If we look at the launch screen here, we've got go.veeam.com/v12 if you want to check out any of the replay. The main reason I mention that, Jason, is we do discuss some ransomware hardening capabilities. Also, we're going to see if we can put into chat a research paper that our colleagues wrote. It's 5 ransomware protection best practices. And while it's a Veeam paper, those concepts apply even if you're not a Veeam user. We do want to give a bit of antidote. We mentioned a few of them. But Jason, as we start to wind down, look ahead. We've got industry insights next week. I'm going to be off. You and Corinne Bissett are going to be talking about which product?
Veeam backup for Microsoft 365. So I'm a longtime Microsoft fan. We've been doing great things in the SaaS space for several years. The next generation of our product for protecting and recovering 365 environments is Eminence. We've been talking about it for a while. There are a couple things we were waiting on V12 to ship so we can have maximum leverage of the flagship. And so Corinne, she has forgotten more about 365 than you and I will ever know. Is joining me in your absence. We're going to talk about some of the data from the cloud protection trends that shipped back in November. Make sure to download that report, specifically on the perspectives of SaaS admins towards protecting SaaS-based data like 365. And then maybe she'll give us a sneak peek on how V7 is turning out.
Awesome. Be sure to check that out. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement. Be safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream.